Buenos, buenos días, ¿no? Pues en realidad ya son tardes. Bienvenidos, bienvenidas todos ustedes a la segunda sesión de este seminario. En esta ocasión vamos a tener la oportunidad de platicar un poco más, así es de que pues les pido que vayan pensando sus preguntas, las dudas que deseen ustedes expresar. Será muy interesante y muy enriquecedor, créanme, escuchar sus opiniones, sus puntos de vista. Será muy interesante para nuestra invitada, la doctora Julie Urbanic, poder escuchar qué dudas surgen o emanan, digamos, de la geografía. Parece ser que la mayoría de los que estamos aquí somos geógrafos y geógrafas, pero también sé que vienen estudiantes tuyos de la escuela moderna, entonces donde quiera que estén, bienvenidos, bienvenidas. Entonces yo creo que será muy rico y el documental es de 35 minutos, 35 minutes, approx. Entonces creo que será habrá bastante espacio para que podamos dialogar, comentar cosas y eso nos hará muy felices poder escuchar esas preguntas. Bueno, este seminario, como para los que no hayan venido ayer, trata sobre cuestiones de la geografía de los animales, es decir, las relaciones que se establecen entre el ser humano y los animales de una manera más equitativa. Cierta diferencia con relación a la tradición en geografía del estudio de los animales desde la perspectiva de la zoogeografía, que más bien es una rama que observa a los animales más como recursos que como iguales, ¿no? Entonces ahí hay un cambio paradigmático relativamente importante. Entonces sobre se ha trazado en cierta medida el discurso de la doctora Julie Urbanic. Entonces en esta ocasión trata de este documental y yo no sé, Julie Urbanic, si entramos directamente al documental o previamente quieres decir alguna especificación sobre el documental. ¿Qué prefieres? Ok, ok. Entonces vamos a entrar directamente al documental y luego ya Julie Urbanic les comentará. Ella fue la creadora de este documental. Y repito, ella como geógrafa pues es muy interesante para nosotros escuchar de qué manera se está introduciendo a los estudios críticos animales. Entonces, sin más, iniciamos el documental. Entonces, Elenita, si podemos apagar la luz.
Animals are not brethren, they are not underlings, they are other nations, caught with ourselves in the net of life and time, fellow prisoners of the splendor and travail of the earth. American naturalist Henry Beston. On the patch of earth that is Kansas City, we encounter these other nations everywhere. Animals we love, animals we eat, animals we fear, animals who work for us. Indeed, it is nearly impossible to move through the city and not encounter animals in one form or another. But what do we really know of their stories? We know the stories of the humans that have made Kansas City, Kansas City. And these stories have been human stories with human actors. But did we really do all this alone? While it is true that humans have drawn the maps of Kansas City, when we look more closely, we find that these animal nations have left their tracks besides humans all along. This film is an invitation to see Kansas City in a new way, as a place profoundly shaped by human and animal nations of all sorts, as what we call a zoopolis, or a city of many species. Gone are the bluffs where the wolves complain to the moon, and gone are the wolves. The roar of the Missouri River is drowned by the roar of city traffic. The log buildings have vanished, and in their stead, towering over the harnessed river, are great skyscrapers housing the commerce of Kansas City that began so humbly 2 centuries ago in the form of a log outpost for collecting furs and trading with Indians. Historian Dorothy Brandt Mara. Kansas City is here because animals were here. Before the great skyscrapers, the tallest structures were trees. The native Kansa and Osage peoples had lived for generations with many animal species among the forests, prairies, glades, savannas, and wetlands. While French and Spanish explorers had moved through the area, it was Meriwether Lewis and William Clark's Corps of Discovery expedition to map the Louisiana Purchase, undertaken at the request of President Thomas Jefferson, that began shaping what would become Kansas City. They stopped in the area on June 26, 1804, on their way out, and again on September 15, 1806, during their journey back. They traveled with Seaman, Lewis's Newfoundland, who was the only dog to survive the entire journey, and he might also be the first recorded pet in Kansas City. Their first-hand experience of the animal riches of the area led William Clark to help establish Fort Osage in 1808. As the second outpost of the Louisiana Territory, its purpose was to protect the newly acquired land and to facilitate trade and relations with the local Osage. The fort held a federally mandated monopoly on their local fur trade from 1808 to 1822. Pierre Chateau leased a cabin at Fort Osage as part of the family's St. Louis-based fur company, and in 1821 sent his son, Francois Chateau, upriver to found a trading post to take advantage of the end of the Fort Osage monopoly. He settled first at Randolph Bluffs, about half-mile west of today's Chateau Bridge and about where Harrah's Casinos now sits. A flood in 1826 had him resettle a little to the west and on the south side of the river, what is today the foot of Harrison and Gillis Streets, and Kansas City's birthplace. Until the 1840s, when the final removal of the native peoples from the area was completed, Chateau's Landing was the first animal-based economy in Kansas City. While the fur trade was good for humans, over-harvesting had a negative impact on species like the American bison, whose population was nearly extinct by the late 1800s. An estimated 60 million beaver in the pre-settlement territories were also nearly wiped out everywhere by 1895. And deer in Missouri went from a population of 500,000 in 1800 to just 325 by 1925. As the fur trade was winding down because of overconsumption and the removal of native peoples, a second animal-based economy moved into the area. This was an outfitter economy supplying the pioneers of the westward expansion along the Santa Fe and Oregon trails. One of the largest overland freighting operations was Russell, Majors, and Waddell, who managed over 1,000 men, 5,000 wagons, and 40,000 oxen. The firm was the chief supplier of the U.S. military in the West, and Alexander Majors became the first millionaire in Kansas City. Known for being an animal lover, he would not hire anyone for his overland teams that was rough with animals, but he overextended himself with his grand idea of the Pony Express. During its 18 months of operation from 1860 to 1861, when the telegraph lines reached the West Coast, the Pony Express used about 400 horses and 80 riders. In the midst of westward expansion, the town of Kansas was chartered in 1850. According to local historians, Kansas City could have been Rabbitville or Possum Trot. What would the city be like today if it had been named after one of these animals? Animals were essential to the building of the new town in 2 ways. A 300-million-year-old rock layer of limestone, which is made largely of the calcareous remains of marine organisms and their shells, is all that is left from the time when the area was on the edge of an inland sea that teemed with animal life. Exposed limestone contributes to the look of Swope Park and Longview Lake and undergirds Quality Hill, Cliff Drive, Penn Valley Park, and the Liberty Memorial. It was also quarried extensively for the city's commercial and residential foundations, including UMKC's Schofield Hall and the Thomas Hart Benton House. Animals are not only in the city's foundations, but they also helped create its infrastructure. To facilitate river access, sections of the downtown bluffs were dug out by men while horses hauled the dirt away, thereby creating streets instead of treacherous trails. Horses not only helped build the city in its early days, they also were central in its defense during the Civil War. From October 21st to 23rd of 1864, the largest Civil War battle west of the Mississippi took place in the area we now know as Swope Park and Loose Park. The Battle of Westport was fought by 30,000 cavalry and mounted infantry troops, with Union forces ultimately prevailing. By 1869, the Kansas City area was well on its way. 3 animal-related events would help take the city into a new era. The first took place east of the city in Warrensburg. A hunting dog named Old Drum, who belonged to Charles Burden, was allegedly killed by Burden's neighbor Leonidas Hornsby. Burden vowed to get justice for his beloved dog, and after 3 trials, the case came to the Johnson County Court of Common Pleas. Burden's lawyer, George Graham Best, made a closing argument known today as the eulogy of the dog and coined the phrase man's best friend.
The one absolutely unselfish friend a man has in this world. The one that will never prove treacherous or ungrateful is his dog.
He swayed the jury, and Burden was awarded $50 for the loss of his best friend, thereby becoming the first legal example of humane concern for animals in the area. The second event takes us west of the city to Abilene in central Kansas. While there had been small-scale meatpacking in the West Bottoms prior to the Civil War, it was Joseph G. McCoy's idea to shorten cattle drives by shipping cattle by rail, then mainly Texas Longhorns, from Abilene to Kansas City, where they could be rested before continuing on to the packing yards in Chicago and farther east. McCoy's cattle shipping coincided perfectly with our third event, the 1869 opening of the Hannibal Bridge. It was the first to span the Missouri River and provided a direct connection between the East and the West. The West Bottoms, with its good grazing area, easy access to water, flat land for laying railroad track, and access to the city, made businessmen realize that maybe they could bypass shipping cattle on altogether, and it was at this moment Cowtown was born. That verdant, reeking, subhuman, terrifying smell of the slaughterhouse and manure, alfalfa and wet sheep's wool, mule piss and man's sweat, all rising up in a sweltering, dusty July cloud that swirled above the rank intermingling of the Kaw and Missouri rivers below. Despite its raucousness, its color, and the high spirits of the men, I knew what the shouts of Coude, Armour, Wilson, Swift and Company at the scale meant. This was one big zone devoted to death. The stockyards were a living funnel into those charnel house holes. Artist Robert Morris. In the 2 years following the opening of the Hannibal Bridge, Kansas City quickly cemented its future as a major livestock center with the opening of the first stockyard, the Kansas Stockyards Company, and a livestock exchange building. Philip Armour's concept of the disassembly line involving a mechanical chain made slaughtering animals more efficient, and Ford would later adapt this animal-related innovation to manufacturing cars. Every bit of the animal had its own money-making quality, and Armour's had a reputation of using everything but the squeal. The stockyards grew rapidly during the next 3 decades, and by 1900, the modern, high-tech livestock industry was home to 14 plants and employed 35,000 people, making it the second largest meatpacking center in the nation after Chicago. While the livestock economy boomed, other animals, and especially horses, continued to be central to the daily lives of Kansas Cityans. The Kansas City Veterinary College, which opened in 1891, was the largest institution of its kind in the country until it closed in 1918 because of World War I. With a reputation for cutting-edge excellence, it included classrooms, a museum, wards for animals, a 500-seat amphitheater, and multiple laboratories. Graduates went on to careers in the federal government with the U.S. Cavalry, the Bureau of Animal Industry, and in the Quarantine and Meat Inspection Service. In 1883, the Humane Society of Kansas City was chartered to aid in protecting children and preventing cruelty thereto, preventing cruelty to animals, and promoting humane sentiments among all classes of persons. One of their main goals was to assist the many working horses and mules. They did this by creating the city's very first fountain in 1904 to quench the thirst of downtown Kansas City's hard-working horses. The first continuously circulating fountain was erected in 1910 and served an average of 1,965 animals during summer days. The fountains were shut down in 1913 because of concern about disease transmission, but the city then installed bucket hydrants. A new law required horse drivers to carry a bucket and to provide water. On one summer day, the busiest hydrant in the city refreshed 290 horses and mules. The Humane Society also sought to protect these working animals from cruelty and abuse. Their agents declared horses unfit for work, corrected horse teams who were overloaded or otherwise abused, and made sure that horses were humanely killed when the time came. Until the rise of cars, horses were the main mode of transportation, and streets like Grand were designed to be wide enough to turn two-horse buggies around. Not only did we have many famous businesses like Begg's Wagon Company, F. Weber's and Sons, and J.J. Foster's catering to the horse economy, but we also had a world-class horse trolley system. The Kansas City and Westport Horse Railroad Company served the downtown and Westport areas. By 1871, the line could reach Westport in 2 hours, if the horse or mule was in a good mood. The Jackson County Horse Railroad Company constructed the bulk of its lines in the West Bottoms. The last horse trolley lines ran in 1897 because the cable lines proved more profitable and less stubborn. We also had a first-class horse-based fire department under Chief George Hale. According to author Paul Kirkman, the trip to a fire was atop a horse-drawn wagon, and the flashing lights and sirens of today were not in use then to clear traffic. Rather, a clanging bell was all there was to warn of the wagon's approach. Barreling through crowded streets towards a blazing inferno, hauled by frightened animals with minds of their own, the drives had to negotiate around fast-moving cars and oil-treated streets on which hooves often slipped. The last horse team made its final emergency run in 1927. Two famous fire horses were Buck and Mac. They performed in 1900 at the National Fire Conference in Paris. After they won the exhibition, Chief Hale was deluged with proposals. The London Daily Mail offered $1,000 to any fire team that could equal the Kansas City team. Each day for a full week, a new team from London took up the challenge, but Kansas City consistently won by performing the routine in 35 seconds. The task required harnessing the horses, running 200 yards with the engine, laying 100 feet of hose, and shooting water through the hose. Kansas Cityans loved their horses, and betting on horse races at venues like the Interstate Fair was a popular pastime. Located in what is today the Roanoke neighborhood, the fair's half-mile track at 38th and Summit brought thousands of people through the gates each year from 1883 to 1886. They made donations and got refunds since gambling was illegal. It was just such a place that changed the course of the city's political history. Jim Pendergast was a betting man and won big on a horse named Climax. He used the money to buy a hotel and saloon in the West Bottoms and named the saloon after the lucky horse. It was the income from this business that allowed him to get into politics. When Jim died in 1911, his brother Tom won Jim's seat on the city council. Joseph Shannon, the leader of the Democrats in the 9th Ward, was the main competition to the Pendergasts. At some point, Pendergast followers became known as the Goats, while Shannon's became the Rabbits. There are different interpretations as to why, with some saying it was simply a difference in the preference of kept animals. Apparently goats were popular in the First Ward, with others saying it was simple name-calling. No matter what the real reasons were, it becomes an interesting piece of animal-related history for Kansas City, and today, a delicious beer by Boulevard Brewery. This time also had famous horses and riders. Lula Long Combs of Longview Farms was a renowned animal lover, philanthropist, and show rider. She performed at the American Royal and won many blue ribbons. Her ability to move out of traditional gender roles earned her and her harness horses respect throughout the world, and at home, she used her farm to produce milk for needy families and gave generously to the Humane Society. Lauren, the 1938 Kentucky Derby winner, came from a Kansas farm run by Herbert M. Wolfe, who was the owner of a local clothing store chain. Lauren is the only Kansas-bred Kentucky Derby winner, and was the first Derby winner ridden by the great jockey Eddie Arcarno. Lauren died in 1955 and was buried on the property beside his sire, Insco. Wolford Farm was sold in 1955 and became the suburban development we know today as Prairie Village.
Lauren's by a length. Another great Derby goes on the books. 22-year-old Arcaro and his gallant mount have won their place in the charmed circle of Kentucky's Bluegrass Hall of Fame.
It wasn't all horses and livestock, though. Thomas Swope, an animal lover and supporter of the Humane Society, donated the land for Swope Park in 1896. By 1907, the Humane Society had begun advocating for a zoo, with Swope Park being the logical choice for its location. Businessman Baron Friedenberg argued at the time that Kansas City cannot be a metropolitan without a zoological garden. The zoo officially opened in December of 1909, with 4 lions, 3 monkeys, a wolf, a fox, a coyote, a badger, a lynx, an eagle, and other birds. While mice were not part of the new zoo, one particular Kansas City mouse was on his way to enduring fame. Walt Disney incorporated Laugh-O-Gram Films in 1922. He often slept in his studio and befriended a resident mouse he named Mortimer. This friendship later became the inspiration for the world's most recognized fictional character. Livestock animals continued to move through the city, but only one breed became intimately connected to the image and landscape of Kansas City itself: the American Hereford. The breed originated in Herefordshire, England, around 300 years ago and was first brought to the U.S. in 1817. It was not until 1881, when Independence farmers Charles Gudgel and Thomas A. Simpson imported the bull Anxiety IV, that Herefords took off. They revolutionized the cattle industry by breeding a line to take advantage of Anxiety's huge hindquarters. Previously, most meat came from the front of the animal, but with his offspring, most meat came from the rear, where more expensive cuts are located. Nearly all American Herefords today share Anxiety's bloodline. Gudgel founded the American Hereford Association in 1883, and not only is it one of Kansas City's longest-lived organizations, but it is responsible for the cultural icon that is the American Royal. It all began with Tom Bass, a freed slave who moved to Kansas City in the early 1890s. One of the most famous horse trainers at the time, he used methods that emphasized gentleness and harmony rather than the often violent, strong-arm training techniques commonly in use. At his suggestion, the fire department held a horse show in 1894 to raise funds to send the fire chief to train in Europe. It was such a success that in 1899, the American Hereford Association took it over, and 55,000 people attended their first event. In 1901, they adopted a new name after the article "Call It the American Royal" was published by the Daily Drover's Telegram editor Walter Neff. He argued that the quality of Kansas City's livestock was superior to that seen at the British Agricultural Royal Show. Over the years, all manner of livestock breeds have been added, as well as horse shows and rodeos. When the Missouri Mule made its first appearance in 1904, it had already been in the area for 100 years, thanks to William Becknell's successful trip in 1822 that founded the Santa Fe Trail. He brought back a herd of Mexican mules, and Missouri farmers were quick to realize their potential. Mules are generally hardier and with more mellow dispositions than horses. The quality of Missouri mules was so renowned that 350,000 of them were sent to help the British during World War I. They became the state animal in 1995. The American Royal, the stockyards, and the city grew together over the first half of the 20th century. In today's dollars, the annual stockyard trade went from $78 million in 1871 to roughly $5 billion in the 1940s. There was only one force that could challenge Cowtown, the Missouri River. The flood of 1951 dealt an irreversible blow to the West Bottoms and contributed to corporate decisions to relocate the packing houses to where the animals were raised and ushering in the era of industrial farming. The end of Kansas City as Cowtown, however, has paved the way for the new animal economies of today. The devastation wrought by the flood of 1951 began a slow demise of the Cowtown economy that wouldn't officially end until 1991, when the bits and pieces of the physical infrastructure that processed millions of animals, employed thousands of people, and made a few people very rich was disassembled like the animals themselves. But that obviously did not end human relationships with other animal nations in the city. The 1954 edition of the American Hereford Association's bull statue, aka Bob for Bull on Building, to the Kansas City skyline is possibly the most readily visible link between Kansas City's livestock past and the present. He now presides over two main legacies of Cowtown. The first is the return of livestock production. Historically, residents not only consumed livestock meat, dairy, and poultry products, but they often lived with these animals on urban farms. But post-World War II, changing cultural norms about hygiene and food safety coincided with the rise of industrial farming methods to remove farm animals from daily city life. Over the past decade, an increasing number of producers are reviving urban and local farming because consumers are becoming more interested in where their animal products come from, how the animals are raised, and how they can support family farmers.
Is a 13.5-acre urban farm. We're full-time farmers. Everything we grow on here we consume, and the rest of it gets sold at the Bad Seed Farmers Market on Friday nights and then also at City Market on Saturday. We have about 100 laying hens here at Herbivore, and we raise them primarily for eggs to be sold at the market. However, the eggs in a way are kind of a byproduct for us. We mainly, as growers of organic fruits and vegetables, we mainly use the chickens to move around the farm and fertilize our various growing fields. So the chickens essentially poop everywhere, giving our soil just amazing fertility. They eat pests, they scratch up weeds. I tell people they're my best farm workers. When it comes to urban agriculture, I'd say that Kansas City is extremely progressive. We have lots of little urban gardens and community gardens, and then we also have some pretty cool urban commercial farms as well. Having sort of a thriving urban farmstead, you can really connect people to their food.
The second Cowtown legacy represents a shift for working animals. The horses and mules of yesterday's street scenes have given way to research animals residing indoors. Since 2006, the Animal Health Corridor has brought together 300 participating businesses, educational institutions, governments, and trade groups to promote the greater Kansas City region as the largest concentration of the animal health industry in the world. The economic impact of the health corridor is equal to the livestock industry. Companies located with the Kansas City corridor annually represent 82% or $7.4 billion of total U.S. animal health and diagnostic sales, and 61% or $14 billion of the total pet food sold in the United States. But not all working animals are indoors. The police department has a canine division as well as the mounted patrol, who returned in 2006 after a 77-year absence. A partnership with the Parks and Recreation Department allows the 11 horses to be stabled at Camp Lake of the Woods in Swope Park. Nostalgia for the horse and buggy days is addressed by the carriage horses on the plaza and their new stables in Gilliam Park. If Old Drum and Seaman were alive today, no doubt their tails would be wagging for the newest animal-related economy to rise in the city. The pet economy includes the full gamut of vets, groomers, pooper scoopers, stores, sitters, boarders, trainers, photographers, technologies, events, cemeteries, and dedicated parks. Several companies have their origins in Kansas City.
People tend to treat their pets like family members in Kansas City. I think it's like the Midwest culture. Like, we bring them into our homes, we welcome them into our lives, we want to take them out for dinner with us, go to special events, make sure they're getting the best quality food that they can eat so they're healthy.
Not only are pets a good business to be in, but in this town, they can also be good for business.
Well, my name's Stacy Robertson, and I own Tea Market, and this is my tea shop. And Gatsby is my very best friend, and he is a Havanese, and Havanese doggies come from Cuba. He's a very, very sweet-spirited dog. He's very kind, and he's quiet and gentle. So he has people that just come in and see him. And actually last week it was pretty funny. There was two girls came in because he was looking out the window, and they came in. They said, "Oh, we just came in to see the dog." And they ended up making it a $56 purchase, and they said, "You have Gatsby to thank for that." So.
Since the founding of the Humane Society, Kansas Cityans have also deeply cared about the welfare of our animal companions. Today there are many shelters in the area, as well as a long list of breed and species-specific rescues. Kansas City Pet Project, while privately operated since 2012, is the public face of the city's management of pets. They are the third largest open admission shelter in the country to receive no-kill status. They receive animals in all conditions from the public and animal control officers, and serve the city with adoptions, socialization of animals, pet education, and shelter care. Spay Neuter Kansas City focuses on the low-income community and provides assistance to families who may not always have the financial means to care for their pets, even though they love them very much.
A lot of people believe that pet owners that are low income shouldn't, if you can't afford a pet, that you shouldn't have one. We feel quite the opposite. With a pet overpopulation problem and pets needing homes, financial means shouldn't be a reason to decline a person the privilege of loving and owning a pet. It's a blessing to have a pet. Our goal is about $10,000 a year. We do about 50 surgeries a day. We have 17 staff members and about 50 active volunteers that help us from day-to-day operations to going out in the community, canvassing, talking to pet owners, and trapping and releasing feral cats.
The city also continues to enjoy a variety of animal celebrities. From the original superstars of Buck and Mac, Lauren and Mortimer, to the sports mascots of Charlie O and Slugger, Warpaint and Casey Wolf, to today's zoo darlings Berlin and Nikita, Kansas City can bask in multi-species pride. In addition, we also have quite a zoo of animal sculptures that have joined the Scout, the Pioneer, and Bob on our limestone foundations. What of the wildlife that started it all? While the fur trapping industry is nowhere near as big as it was in Kansas City's early days on the river, an economy based on hunting, trapping, furs, and taxidermy still flourishes.
I think so many people forget that the hunting community puts so much back into supporting the animals for conservation. And if you look way into the past, as we were talking, from the trapping trade way back, when Kansas City was formed, to now the hunting industry, which supports my industry, hunting and fishing stores, gas stations, motels, it's endless. So the hunting industry is very important to every kind of industry. I mean, it doesn't seem like it is, but it is tied in so many different ways.
Other businesses, such as Oracle, remind us what wildlife can mean for urban living.
And I think they're a good reminder when you're in the city environment that we come from nature and that they can provide a sense of balance for us. The schools in particular are a reminder of kind of our hard inner structure, and then the taxidermy reminds us of our soft, plush outer structure. So those are probably my favorite types of specimens. Makes you feel good about being able to take something and preserve it and continue to enjoy its beauty after its death.
The city works closely with the Missouri Department of Conservation to manage wildlife. They have reintroduced the peregrine falcon to the area because people love peregrines for their beauty, their speed, and especially their love of pigeons as a food source. When it comes to deer, the city has the opposite problem. There are so many that it is hard to believe that they were once scarce due to overhunting. Managed hunts in Swope Park remove around 500 a year, which reduces human-deer conflicts and also ensures deer do not succumb to starvation or disease. The city-owned Lakeside Nature Center is a wildlife rehabilitation hospital and also educates residents about the lives of our native species.
We're all in this together. People and wildlife, the nature around you, we can't live in an isolated environment without them. We have to remember, we actually moved into their territory. We moved into their homes and kicked them out. So what's happened in this urban environment, they've adjusted to us. So that's one of the most important things, is to see the beauty in them. Not that they're a nuisance or that they're on my property, but they're part of the natural world. They're part of what we belong to also, which is the environment.
Kansas City has always been described as a city caught between east and west, north and south, a city of innovation and tradition, of poverty and wealth, of harmony and strife. And when we look at the city's relations with other animal nations over this time, we see these complexities echoed. Kansas City is a city that has loved its animals, worked its animals, consumed its animals, and celebrated its animals. These tensions of life and death, commodity and family, and belonging and exile that we have shared show that without these other animal nations, Kansas City would not be Kansas City. Kansas City is indeed an American zoopolis.
Pues, bueno, esperamos. Bueno, Elenita, si podemos ir encendiendo las luces, por favor. Gracias. Bueno, afortunadamente tenemos aquí a la creadora de este video. Vamos a tener una conversación entonces con ella. Vamos a ahorita poner unas sillas aquí enfrente y yo creo que será más fácil conversar, porque sí vamos a estar como una media hora parados. Para aquellas personas que no lo sepan y quieran traducción, afuera hay unos aparatitos para traducción simultánea. Y bueno, entonces antes de continuar, Jafet, ¿me ayudas a subir unas sillas acá? Y podemos pasar aquí al frente. Mejor así para no estar de pie. Pues bueno, la doctora Julie Urbani, que nos acompaña de Kansas City, la creadora de este documental, y quien pues evidentemente es la experta en esta área. Entonces, si ustedes tienen cualquier comentario, cualquier idea, cualquier duda que quieran expresar, es el momento más adecuado para hacerlo. Quizá nada más antes de, si surgen algunas preguntas, comentarios, comentarte, Julie, que también tenemos aquí a personas interesadas en desarrollar su proyecto de investigación para la maestría o para el doctorado en cuestiones de animales, y también tenemos gente que ha realizado o que está realizando o que ha realizado alguna investigación relativa a turismo y maltrato animal. Entonces, habemos de todo aquí en la sala. ¿Alguna pregunta, algún comentario? ¿Sí? Ok. Un momentito, por favor. Entonces, yo creo que sí, me comenta Yuli que si sería bueno comentar algo acerca del documental. Entonces, yo creo que sí sería el momento más adecuado. Entonces, adelante, por favor.
Gracias for coming today and watching the film. I just wanted to, I'm sorry, I can't listen to the translation and talk in English at the same time. It confuses me. Yeah, I didn't just turn it down. Yes. So I just wanted to say, first of all, this was my first time making a film, and I think it clearly shows that, that's the case. But still, you have to start from somewhere and try new things all of the time, right? But my main goal in trying to put together this film was to understand what a zoopolis looks like. And so a zoopolis is a city of all species. We can think of just a regular polis, which means city, and normally we think of that as a human-only space. But the truth is that we live in a multi-species world no matter where we look. So the question became, how do you tell the story of the history of a city and see the animals as part of that story, right? So it turned out to be a very large project. I did a lot of historical research, just trying to understand the history of the city itself. I went and looked for all of the historical pictures and video footage that I could find. And one of the most interesting bits of video footage was from 1897, and that was the footage that we saw of the horse trolleys. And that was some of the first footage taken in Kansas City as well. So I felt like that was a pretty good score in a historic sense. But I also wanted to combine the story with historic maps from the time that I was talking about, because I wanted to be able to locate viewers geographically in terms of where we're talking about things happening in the city. And so a lot of times we just kind of think, well, the city developed and it had a livestock industry and there were zoos. But I wanted people to see exactly where that was happening. And so I tried to combine those historical maps with the historical footage, and then also with the present day interviews with people working with animals. And I realized that there's a lot of information in there, especially still for people that are not familiar with Kansas City. And that's just part of the learning process. But as a whole, I feel like we did a pretty good job of demonstrating how integral animals have been to the city's history, economically, politically, and culturally. And so I just wanted to provide that as a little bit of context for what we were going for in doing the project and kind of how we went about doing it. So we ended up going to 5 different archives, doing about 30 different video interviews. We went to about 25 different animal-related events. And again, only bits and pieces of that footage appeared in the final video. And finally, there was a lot of material that we couldn't include because we couldn't get enough historical visuals to go with it. We had a very tiny budget. I'm talking like $0. And so it just, it became a question of balancing out what we could do in the time frame that we had with our own skills and the equipment that we had at the time. So I hope that gives you just a little bit of a background for the film itself. And of course now I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Muchas gracias, Julie. Bueno, ahora sí, por favor, adelante.
Sí, muchas gracias, buenos días. Ayer tuve la oportunidad de ver su presentación en línea y lo agradezco mucho al instituto por esta iniciativa. Y bueno, comentaba que los animales actualmente se veían como sujetos en lugar de como objetos, que era como una tendencia mundial y afortunada desde mi punto de vista. Mi pregunta es qué tanto en Estados Unidos existe la iniciativa de tomarlos como sujetos de derecho, es decir, que tengan algún derecho per se, que puedan ser sujetos de derecho como individuos. Y en este sentido, las prácticas de caza, cómo quedaría, ¿no? Si hay alguna iniciativa de promover más bien un turismo de caza fotográfica que se hace, digamos, de manera más sostenible. Y bueno, esa sería básicamente la pregunta.
So I'm hearing that your question is, in the United States, are animals entitled to legal rights? Is that correct? Okay. So it's actually very difficult to answer that question because it depends on which animal you're talking about, and it depends on where you are in the United States. So, for example, if you look at the federal government, the U.S. Department of Agriculture defines animals in a way that excludes all rats, mice, and birds from being regulated for humane treatment. And that is because there's a lot of research, scientific research on those species. So we don't want to have to treat them fairly because in a laboratory condition, we're probably not. So how you define an animal puts it into a different class of treatment, okay? So for example, in Missouri, we do have animal regulations on different species. Like if you have your pets, your dog or your cat or even your pig or your bird or something that you might have as a pet, because it is a pet, you are regulated in terms of humane care. So you can't just beat your dog or starve your cat to death. If somebody finds out about that, then you can get charged with animal cruelty. Okay? So, but if we're talking about livestock in the city, there are no rules about how you are supposed to treat the animals. Somebody can report you, but you won't necessarily get in any trouble for it if you are not taking care of them properly. So to answer your question, there is a lot of people like groups like the Humane Society or like the Kansas City Pet Project or Kansas City Spay and Neuter that are trying to advocate for better laws. But it's a process, and it's a process in the United States where you are and which animal you're talking about. So I don't know if there's a comparison that you could make here in Mexico, for example, about, or even in the city, in terms of laws about how cruelty might be regulated, or even just recognizing animals. But maybe that would be helpful to think of the comparison.
Perdón, y en términos de las prácticas de caza, ¿hay alguna iniciativa para hacerlas en términos de fotografía en lugar de digamos, de eliminación del animal?
So you're really putting me on the spot here and making me pick a side. That's what I hear you're trying to make me do here. So in Missouri, there are actually, you can go to parks where you can see animals like American bison or deer or birds, and there are lots of people that would take pictures of them. In Missouri, you can also hunt a whole variety of different species. So in the United States, that practice of enjoying and taking pictures of wildlife and also hunting animals exists at the same time and in the same place. The question of whether one is better than the other is going to depend on your cultural background. So for example, I am not somebody who grew up in a family that hunted, and I have no context for hunting. So I don't hunt. I prefer to see the animals living, especially the wild animals. But as we saw in the film, for people who grew up hunting, and that is part of their culture, that's part of their community, they see hunting as a very important part of their identity. And actually, they would argue that they're being more sustainable by eating wild animals than by eating normal livestock, because those wild animals live free lives and they get to move and live and have their normal behaviors, versus the animals that are living in poorer conditions on industrial farms. So there's arguments for both sides, and I think that the gentleman in the film also talked about the importance of hunting to local economies. And there is an economy that happens with both tourism for picture taking and with tourism for hunting that brings in money. So it's, again, a complex answer. And in some places, like a national park in the United States, like maybe you've heard of Yellowstone National Park or the Grand Canyon, you can't do any hunting there. We agree, that's not allowed, right? So in some places we do say you can only take pictures, you can't kill the animals. But I don't like to hunt, but again, I also understand that that is part of people's identity. That's also part of living with other wild species. We do not have large predators in Missouri anymore, so if people in Missouri were not hunting deer, the populations would just be out of control. They would be very unhealthy. They would be causing a lot more conflicts with humans. And so in some ways, it also acts as a balance to the ecosystem. But again, because we have removed the wolves and the large numbers of coyotes and the pumas that would otherwise help control those populations. So does that help you understand how we would look at that in Missouri or where we're from, or in the U.S.? Yes?
Gracias. Thank you.
Bueno, yo quiero complementar un poco con respecto a la Ciudad de México, qué es lo que sucede acá. Primero, pues poniéndonos a pensar igual en la legislación animal, la cuestión es de todas las reglas y normas que se han establecido en torno al maltrato animal. Es también una situación muy, muy especista, hay una protección animal principalmente hacia las mascotas, muy similar a lo que sucede con los Estados Unidos, en donde el concepto biológico de animal no entra en el concepto legal. Aquí en México sabemos que entró en vigor el año pasado la ley de maltrato animal en la Ciudad de México, pero está más enfocado hacia la cuestión de perros y gatos. Porque si una persona, a fin de cuentas, mata una araña, mata una cucaracha, mata un pájaro, pues eso ni siquiera se considera como si fuera parte de maltrato animal, porque en la concepción legal no entran esas especies. Y la cuestión de la identidad, para entender, por ejemplo, qué es lo que pasa con los animales, pues hay que pensar muchísimo en el debate que se tiene aquí en la Ciudad de México y a nivel nacional con respecto a la tauromaquia. Se ve como una actividad que está relacionada con el turismo fuertemente, sí. Hay cuestiones antiéticas al respecto de la tauromaquia, perfecto, pero la identidad que está atrás de todo esto es lo que ha imposibilitado muchas veces que no importa el sufrimiento animal, no importa lo que representa en términos de relaciones jerárquicas de poder, que no importa la cuestión, por ejemplo, del maltrato y del abuso que tiene una especie, la identidad ha pesado mucho para que sea una actividad económica, una actividad que no se haya podido abolir, además de todo el beneficio económico que le trae a ciertos grupos empresariales.
Antes de darte la palabra, Daniel, y es muy interesante tu pregunta sobre la cuestión del turismo cinegético o la actividad cinegética. Yo creo que pediste la palabra y Daniel Rodríguez, su tesis de maestría, él trabajó cuestiones de las relaciones de los locales en ambientes donde hay turismo cinegético y cómo esto se vive por las poblaciones locales. Anticipo que mi posición es completamente en contra de matar animales, específicamente del turismo cinegético. Ahora, el argumento que se maneja en las comunidades que practican el turismo cinegético es que ellos permiten la muerte del animal para defender su supervivencia. En muchos lugares de México y del mundo se matan animales de manera clandestina. Y entonces la creación de las sumas, ese es el argumento, la creación de las sumas de alguna manera permiten que se regulen el ingreso de poblaciones que entran a matar, y cuando desde el gobierno, digamos, se determina en qué área se puede cazar, de alguna manera la población, estos animales se convierten en algo muy valioso para ellos. Antes de que se regularan estas sumas, pues la gente entraba y mataba lo que quería y punto. Y entonces esto estaba llevando a la extinción. Repito, es el argumento. Y entonces, con la regulación de estos espacios, supuestamente se va disminuyendo la posibilidad de la extinción de una especie determinada. Entonces, ahí se sitúa la discusión de cazar para conservar. Pero si nosotros movemos un poco el marco teórico y asumimos que los animales son seres autoconscientes, sintientes, igual que nosotros, que tienen la capacidad de sentir placer y dolor, y nosotros colocamos a estos seres en la misma posición que nosotros, evidentemente apreciamos eso como una muerte de un sujeto, de alguien que sabe y está consciente de que se está confrontando a una situación de muerte, que quién sabe cuánto tiempo sea el proceso de morir tras aventarle una bala, y que igual que nosotros sentiría, digamos, el mismo dolor. Desde esa perspectiva uno se plantearía, quizá, y además muchos de los cazadores, si tú revisas documentales, muchos cazadores manejan el discurso de que si cazan es porque les importan los elefantes, las jirafas, en fin, ¿no? Una serie de animales. Y entonces que ellos en realidad defienden eso y por eso están dispuestos a pagar tal cantidad de dólares o de pesos o de la moneda que sea, justamente por defender esto. Pero entonces la pregunta sería, bajo la perspectiva de que los animales sufren y sienten igual que nosotros, no habrá, y verdaderamente para los cazadores son tan importantes los animales, no podrían en tal caso donar ese dinero, que no murieran los animales y continuar con ellos. Evidentemente estás frente a una discusión que ahorita está en el candelero, que está en la discusión internacional sobre nuestras relaciones con los animales. Y las posiciones son muy encontradas. O sea, desde quienes son totales defensores de matar animales para conservar, hasta quienes dicen ningún animal sintiente con sistema nervioso central y que sea capaz, que sea autoconsciente de su existencia y que sea capaz de sentir el dolor y el placer, se justifica su muerte. Daniel.
Bueno, soy Daniel y mi pregunta va un poco relacionada con el comentario de la compañera y de Álvaro. Mi trabajo de licenciatura consistió en el estudio del turismo cinegético y la población local en relación al borrego cimarrón en el volcán de las Tres Vírgenes en Baja California Sur. Como el documental mostró, Kansas City hay una producción de un espacio social donde se está reconociendo que también hay otros animales, pero también hay actividades económicas un poco contradictorias que consisten en quitarle la vida a esos animales. Esto es un tema muy interesante porque en efecto hace que las naciones de otras especies y los humanos, al estar construyendo ese espacio, en su vida cotidiana estén en contacto con esa otredad. En ese sentido, ¿cómo ha cambiado la percepción de los locales hacia esta muerte, hacia de las otras naciones de animales? Mi comentario va un poco relacionado y lo cierro con lo que comentaba Álvaro, porque en en el volcán de las Tres Vírgenes en Baja California Sur, donde el borrego cimarrón es cazado, el costo por cazar ese borrego puede ir desde $50,000 hasta $90,000. Ha provocado una dinámica interesante. En primer hay que poner en cuenta que hay unas relaciones que hay ciertos factores que están jugando poder ahí. Es la percepción de los locales, la actividad económica capitalista y el poder económico de los cazadores. Los cazadores son personas que pueden ser dueños de fútbol, de equipos de fútbol en Estados Unidos, equipos de básquetbol, dueños de empresas que producen balas, no sé. Eh, estas personas, al poner ese dinero ahí, tienen el permiso de cazar al borrego cimarrón. Antes de que tuviera esa actividad cinegética, los locales no convivían mucho con el borrego cimarrón, simplemente lo venían como un recurso más para comer o algo que podían ofertar a los cazadores clandestinos. Pero después de que hubo este coto se hizo este rancho cinegético, la población ha tenido una convivencia más cercana con el borrego cimarrón. Dentro de las personas que trabajan dentro de esa zona de caza, hay algunos que dicen, es que no es tan bueno que le quitemos la vida al borrego, es mejor respetarlo y que él viva. Nosotros plantearíamos hacer una cacería fotográfica, pero ¿quién va a estar dispuesto a pagar los $75,000 que necesitaríamos para llevar a esas personas a tomar solo una fotografía? Si traemos más personas a tomar fotografías, va a ser demasiado denso y el borrego cimarrón se va a ir, no va a soportar la presión de tantos turistas. Entonces entran en juego muchas cosas que tienen que ver con cómo viven las personas y en un espacio de vida y cómo conviven con esas otras naciones. Y eso cambia bastante la percepción. Entonces, en esta zona rural, está viendo esa división de percepciones, en los que sí están totalmente de acuerdo con que maten al borrego cimarrón y solo lo ven el recurso económico, que sí hay que cuidarlo porque me da dinero, hasta las otras personas que tienen más empatía con la existencia del borrego, y no solamente el borrego cimarrón, sino también de los otros elementos naturales que permiten que ese borrego viva. Entonces, mi pregunta va como en ese sentido, saber cómo ha sido ese cambio de percepción de los locales de Kansas City respecto a quitarle la vida a otros animales para tener actividades económicas.
And so just to clarify, are you asking specifically only about hunting, or are you asking about okay, so how have attitudes changed overall? I think to try and answer that question is that there is more understanding of how animals are treated in terms of like inside the livestock industry or what it means to be cruel to a pet. I think that has definitely started to change. And so, for example, we see that in an economic sense around food issues with a rise of vegetarian and vegan restaurants in the Kansas City area because Kansas City, as we have seen, is known for its cows and is also really known for barbecue. That's kind of the meat specialty, right? But so you can go and have a lot more access now to vegetarian and non-meat foods than you ever really could before. So we see the population shift, but it's not as if it's, you know, overall that the whole city is going to ban meat eating or anything like that, right? And then there are other people who are perfectly happy to eat bacon 10 times a day, and their attitude is that animals taste good and I don't really care, right? So, you know, but those people at the same time may also love their pets and spend a tremendous amount of money buying toys for their animals or watching Disney movies or anything like that. So what becomes interesting is to see how people put their different relationships they have with animals into different categories, right? So when it comes to hunting, people in Kansas City as a whole would get very upset if a hunter did something very cruel and just, you know, maybe, we did have one example where we had a deer that lived in an urban cemetery, and everybody liked it. They had named the deer Ella or something like that. And then one day, somebody was walking around and somebody had shot the deer in the neck with an arrow, and it was still alive. And so it was kind of staggering around, and eventually animal control came and they had to put the deer down. this was just somebody being mean, right? But it caused a huge uproar. The city was very upset that somebody had shot this deer, even though they don't get upset when animal control kills 500 deer in Swope Park to manage the deer population, right? So we liked this one deer because we had turned it into a pet, but the other deer become deer, like not individual deer. And so we're upset by individual cruelty, but it often doesn't make us link it to larger practices, if that makes sense. So Kansas City is like most places. It's just, there's just a lot of layers of attitudes and relationships and practices that people have. And to me, what is really interesting is trying to map that out on the landscape and trying to understand, where people could be eating their pig barbecue and then very sad about the deer getting shot, and then go buy a pet from the pet store. They're just very contradictory behaviors. And I think that, we all do that to some extent, right? So it's very hard to make a generalized statement about attitudes because there's a lot of different kinds of people with different kinds of backgrounds.
Sí. Con Irma y Frances.
Buenas tardes y muchas gracias, doctora. Lamentablemente no pude estar ayer y tal vez entonces quede fuera de contexto la pregunta, pero no me puedo aguantar dada la temática y lo que ha planteado y que también llegué ya iniciado el video. ¿Qué opinión tiene en este aspecto de utilizar o convivir con los animales, distintas especies en distintas formas? El caso de la policía montada de Nueva York, no sé si en Kansas tengan policía montada, aquí también tenemos policía montada, que incluso en los juegos partidos de Ciudad Universitaria vienen a hacer vigilancia. Incluso teníamos en el centro de la ciudad como cuestión atractiva la policía charra, ¿no? Es decir, que andaba vestido de charro en los caballos. No me ha tocado ver yo a ninguno, pero no sé si continúen, fue solo un momento, no lo sé, ¿no? Estamos utilizando también a esta especie, pero eso en un medio nada favorable y además en lo que se enfrenta, dado que es para protección de la ciudadanía en cualquier contexto, pero que no es nada favorable para esta especie, ¿no? Para los equinos que estén pues en el pavimento y a lo mejor muchas horas ahí esperando a que pase el partido y la radiación no les ayuda, ¿no? En fin, ¿qué opinión tendría al respecto sobre eso? Por otro lado, también tenemos, aunque es para favorecer a las personas, las terapias con ciertos animales, llámese delfines o los mismos equinos. Y por otro lado, por ejemplo, en el contexto de hablando de los ciervos, en algunos lugares en Canadá, pues dado que está prohibido atentar contra la vida de los ciervos, se está volviendo, pues, entre comillas, una plaga, porque andan deambulando en las calles, entran en los jardines de las casas, se pueden estar comiendo, pues, de las hermosas flores de los jardines de las personas, y pues en algún momento eso también, pues ya al llamarse plaga implica que hay molestia para cualquier lado. Entonces me encantaría escuchar sus observaciones al respecto. Gracias.
Okay, thank you for your question. So in the case of the mounted patrol that you have here in Mexico City, we also have in Kansas City. We, as humans, have had a very long history of domesticating and using horses in a variety of ways as working animals, right? So there is not a controversy in Kansas City about using horses as police horses. That those police horses are very well cared for. There's even a private organization that that you as a citizen can donate money to, buy them special treats at holidays and, do things like that so you can care, plus they get money to care for them from the city and things. So they're very well cared for, they're very well trained, and you as an individual actually get in a tremendous amount of trouble if you hurt a police horse, in any sort of situation where they're out in the public, right? So we see the mounted patrols as very much heroes in the way that we look at policemen as heroes. And the police also use police dogs, which you also have here, right? And again, these are very well cared for animals. They are, very well trained. And the police officers often go on to keep the horses or the dogs when they're retired from the police force. So we have a very positive view of that. But we do have carriage horses in our plaza area where the horses are pulling for tourists, just taking them around for a little tour. And there has been ongoing protests and conflict about those horses for exactly like what you're saying. Are they working too long of an hours? Are they getting breaks? And the city has responded, and they have put regulations on how long the horses can be out. When do they have to have a break? What is the weather that they can be out in? Like, they can't be out when it's raining and the streets could be slippery and they could get hurt like that, right? So that has been a little bit of a controversy, but not using them for a protection because we see them as heroes, right? And we like them if they're used in a tourist sense, as long as we feel like they're being treated fairly. So we don't have some people would have a conflict about using animals at all like that, right? And say it's unethical, that it's just a form of domination. But as the city as a whole, it's just not like that. The city as a whole accepts this type of use. And now I've forgotten the second half of her question. The animal-assisted therapies, yes. So again, this is it's a pivot in terms of the working animal relationships we have, right? So animal-assisted therapies is seen as a very positive experience for the people, right? And it undoubtedly is in very many cases, right? Especially with children. This works very well with children. There are people that are concerned about the similar kinds of things. How long are the horses or the dolphins or the miniature horses, how long do they have to work? What if they don't feel like working with the kids or the people on that day? What actually happens, right? So in the past several years, there have been organizations that have tried to work to create common ground for the treatment of those animals so that they are just not being worked all the time and that their subjectivity is being recognized. And so let's say a few years ago, it wouldn't matter if the horse felt like it wanted to work today or not. It would have to go out and work. But now, if it seems like the horse is not in a good mood, they say, okay, you go and eat your grass and do your business, and we'll see who else wants to do it. So, they're trying to get on the same page in terms of all of the different people that are doing that with all the different species. Because again, you're doing something like that with different species who have different needs about how long can they work, what breaks do they might want, how much can children touch them or pet them or things. So that's actually much more better regulated. What is not as regulated or really regulated in any way would be something like a petting zoo. So for example, if you go to, like a regular zoo, or maybe you go to a camp or just some type of museum, you'll have the area where they'll have like goats and turkeys and miniature horses, and you can feed them food, and you can basically just touch them and just be in their face all the time, right? The animals can't escape from that, and they just have to stand there all day. And so there is no regulation about something like that, and people don't really, it's just not an issue. Like people are not really caring about, well, should we worry about these animals, right? So again, that very, very specific location of where these animals are makes a huge difference for how much we worry about them, or if we see them as heroes or working animals, or just there for us to laugh at in our amusement, kind of a thing.
Sí, Frances, adelante, por favor.
Hola. Bueno, muchas gracias. Thank you, Julie. Y muchas gracias a Jafet y a Álvaro por esta iniciativa, me parece muy importante. Gracias por no pasarnos imágenes terribles en el video, que ya estábamos aquí, mi amiga y yo dijimos, no, si empiezan a pasarnos imágenes de la industria de los animales, nos salimos corriendo, luego regresamos. Pero, bueno, me parece muy importante esta iniciativa porque yo le comentaba ayer justamente a Álvaro, aquí en México no existe la tradición de que los geógrafos nos ocupemos de estos temas, ¿no? De hecho, son pioneros, ellos ya más reconocidos. Yo me estoy tratando de acercar al tema desde el ámbito de los riesgos y los desastres, ¿no? Que, bueno, mucho he trabajado en esto de cómo prevenir y la resiliencia y cómo salvarnos y cómo recuperarnos, pero los animales no están incorporados, ¿no? Y no solamente en este tema de los riesgos y los desastres, no solamente son los animales de compañía, no solamente es en la ciudad, también los incendios o las inundaciones en las zonas rurales, hay que considerar a los animales para también las medidas de mitigación y de resiliencia, ¿no? Y bueno, me parece que, yo ayer le comentaba a Álvaro que una chica que quería ingresar aquí a la maestría en geografía y su tema de trabajo era la relación de la sociedad con las carretas, con los caballos en Guadalajara, porque se ha puesto de moda que las carretas, como en Acapulco y en otras ciudades, pero donde los caballos son tratados de una manera terrible, no como las carretas de Nueva York, no, estos caballos son tratados de una manera terrible. Las condiciones de los animales no humanos en México son terribles, todavía, ¿no? Un poco menos en la Ciudad de México, pero todavía son muy fuertes, muy malas. Y ella hizo su tesis de licenciatura y en la licenciatura como que es más fácil porque el asesor es el que dice, bueno, vamos a tratar este tema, como en tu caso, y no hay mucha injerencia del resto de los colegas, a excepción del sínodo, y se puede desarrollar el trabajo. Ella hizo su trabajo sobre el gallo de pelea, la relación de la sociedad con el gallo de pelea, inclusive con una cuestión de género, ¿no? Pero ya para ingresar a la maestría no le aceptaron el tema de las carretas de caballos en Guadalajara, ¿no? Entonces, bueno, me parece, ayer le comentaba a Álvaro, qué bueno que esta iniciativa, que vienes, que nos compartes, como ayer dijo Jafet, bueno, me cambió la vida, Julie, la perspectiva, pues sí, tenemos mucho que decir, yo creo, los geógrafos y mucho que trabajar en estos temas, ¿no? Yo les repito, desde mi ámbito, que es el de los riesgos y los desastres, pues un poco trabajar esto, ¿no? Inclusive los recursos naturales, que también es un ámbito en el que los geógrafos trabajamos, también hacemos propuestas de ordenamiento territorial y de pronto nos atrevemos a proponer como una medida de desarrollo que se haga un criadero de cocodrilos en Tabasco para que utilicemos la piel para bolsas de piel. O sea, ¿cómo podemos desde la geografía tener ese tipo como de propuestas? Se me hace como, ya, como decías Álvaro, como tenemos que evolucionar el marco teórico, ¿no? Y las propuestas tendrían que ser otras, ¿no? Yo, bueno, los felicito y pues nada más.
Bueno, creo que más que pregunta fue un comentario y muchas gracias, pero yo lo que haría sería a tu comentario, a lo mejor sería interesante, ya que Frances dio una imagen de cómo está la situación de la geografía de los animales en México, ¿ustedes viven algo similar en la geografía tal vez es mucho preguntar de Estados Unidos, pero de Kansas City? ¿Hay una sensibilidad entre las geógrafas de Kansas City? ¿Hay cambios o la situación es relativamente igual?
Okay, well, thank you for your comments. And I would like to start off by saying that I understand your concern about what you were going to see in the film. And I would understand if you got up and walked out if it was something that was upsetting. I would too. So it was very important to me when making the film that I didn't include anything that would be like that. And the reason for that is because it is very new for people to try and think about relationships with other species. And we usually either have that with National Geographic style movies where it's about the lions and there's really like no people in like National Geographic, right? So it's just all animal. Or then we have like the undercover expose where it's the terrible things that are happening, right? So you have those two extremes, and it's very hard to bridge the gap and help people just kind of, how can I think about this without actually having to be physically ill or get really mad or feel very defensive about things that I might be doing as a person if I'm eating meat or whatever I might be doing, right? So that was one thing I was trying to do, is trying to make it accessible for people to even just try and enter the mindset of how do you see animals. And as to the question of geographers and thinking about something like the risks and hazard geographers doing that kind of work, I think that it is an interesting and ongoing question. And animal geographers are working to reach out across the different subdisciplines in geography to try and see how geographers can work together. And a couple of examples that we see in the real world of something like that happening were the changes that happened after Hurricane Katrina in the United States, which happened in 2005. And that was a very devastating hurricane that came into the New Orleans area, which is in the southern part of the country, and caused tremendous flooding and just ended up being a terrible disaster for everybody for a very long time. But one of the big problems that emerged from that particular situation was that people would not evacuate because they were not allowed to evacuate with their pets. So they stayed home and then ended up causing more problems for the rescue people, and just kind of a cascade effect, right? So after that happened, the Humane Society and other animal groups went to the federal government and said, we have to change emergency management and disaster response practices, because we have to have a way for people to take their pets out. They have to be allowed to put them on buses. You have to let them go. And so they implemented a new federal act that now you have to coordinate with the emergency rescue and management teams on the ground, all of the rescue teams that are working on the mapping and things like that of the in-the-moment changes. So that's an example of a real on-the-ground change. Right now we have the terrible wildfires happening in many parts of California. And it has been very interesting, because one of the first things that the response is now is, how are we going to get these, this is an area that there's a lot of horses, how are we going to get these horses and livestock out, because these people are not going to leave, right? So we are sending in resources to help them actually get out, because that helps people get out. And so in terms of disaster responses, I think that in the US, there is a lot more understanding that this has to be part of how we respond, and that this also has to be part of the planning process for planning about fires or earthquakes or floods or hurricanes or tornadoes or whatever events like that have to happen. But the other interesting side of that is a lot of the wildlife know when these things are happening. They know when the hurricane is changing, because they have better senses to understand the pressure is dropping or whatever. And so we can actually study wildlife almost in a certain way as an early form of intervention and recognition. And we saw some of that happen with the tsunami that happened in Indonesia, which maybe that was 2008, I think now, I can't, 2004, where after the tsunami, the earthquake, which then caused the tsunami, happened, when they were talking to people, they realized that all of the animals left the coastal areas. I mean, the dogs, the elephants, the birds, everybody was like, we are out of here, right? And they did that before the tsunami arrived. So, if we were actually understanding animal behavior, we could actually incorporate some of those things as possible early warning mechanisms, right? So in terms of working with geographers that are working in that tradition, I think the risks hazards tradition, there is definitely overlap in terms of these different ways of thinking about bringing animals in to that area. So does that help respond? Okay. I feel like I talk for a very long time and then I just lose track of what I'm saying. So.
Hi again. I'm going to try speak in English.
Okay.
Bueno, I wrote my question before because I could forget it. So, how long did the documental take you to do it? And if you had problems doing it, if you had, what were those situations? I mean, looking for information, doing interviews in that places that you mentioned it in the video, or only looking in books or old videos or something like that.
Okay, well, excellent. Your English is so much better than my Spanish. Okay. Altogether, I probably spent about maybe just over a year, and that wasn't working on the documentary like full time, but just kind of the whole time period. Of course, at the end, there was full time and panic, right? But in terms of some of the problems or just the interesting events that happened along the way, in terms of the archival work, like going into the libraries and trying to look at the history or look for pictures or video footage, things like that, it turns out that when people, working in the libraries, when they do their cataloging, nobody in 1910 thought to organize things by animals. Nobody cared. It wasn't the way anybody thought, right? So I couldn't just go to the library and say, give me everything you have on horses, right? You have to go through every single thing trying to find where information might be, right? So, so that was very interesting to just realize how differently we would think, because now in a library archive, they do actually start organizing things by political events around animals or livestock events or pets, things of that nature. So that has been a change in terms of the way that research or librarians actually document and archive material. So that turned out to be very difficult because I know that there is a lot more historical material in the archives that we could access, but it would literally require you to just go sit there all day, day after day, just searching and trying to find it, right? So the other interesting thing was who would talk to us and who wouldn't. And that was interesting because I tried very hard to talk to somebody from the animal health corridor, one of those, when all of those companies kind of popped up on the screen, that was this huge billion-dollar industry in Kansas City. I wanted to talk to anybody from any one of those companies, and just so I could have them on tape talking about what they do, not to catch them doing something bad, but just to have their voice, right? They would not talk to me at all. They would respond very politely, oh, no, we don't have time, we can't talk to you, and basically just blow me off, right? I don't know if that translates, yes. But at the same time, the animal rights groups would also not talk to me on camera. And that was because I was talking about meat eating and hunting, and I wasn't presenting a fully animal rights film. And so they didn't want to be part of something that wasn't going to advocate their perspective, right? So actually the hunters ended up being the people who talked to me the most. I talked to the hunting community, I talked to trappers, we went to a fur auction where from the video you saw them like kind of combing the furs, and then they were looking at the beaver skin where there was the auctioneer was talking. They were happy to talk to me. I mean, I sat there for hours looking at pictures of dead animals with them and listening to all their stories. but they were very worried that I was an animal rights activist, that I was going to take their material and use it against them. So in that sense, it was really interesting to see, you know, who was accessible. And, you know, again, a lot of other people were very open and very willing to share their stories. But to have the animal rights people and the animal research people both not want to talk to me, I just thought, wow, you know, that is a pretty interesting situation there. And so I think, you know, if I was going to make part 2 of this movie or version 2 or something, the most important thing would be to clearly have a professional doing the sound. And, you know, and it's just sort of like a more professional version in that way. But I think having something like this does give me legitimacy to move forward and ask more in-depth questions and focus on other issues. And I think that was something that I learned, that I can go back now to the hunting community and talk to them because I did this groundwork and they can see that I'm not, you know, a crazy animal rights person, so to speak. So it was just, you know, a very important learning process as I did the project, and I loved it. I'm ready to make another film, but with a bigger budget. I needed the Hollywood level budget for this, right?
Julie es pregunta y la voy a hacer en español. Viendo el documental de la Zoópolis en Kansas City, a mí me queda clarísimo lo que establece Jason Rival en el texto de que los animales son parte de la clase trabajadora. El entenderlos como otras naciones, o sea, tal vez me llama la atención porque sí entiendo a qué te refieres con otras naciones, pero para entender la relación que tenemos de los animales al interior de la ciudad, ¿no sería un poco más conveniente darles el carácter de ciudadanos porque habitan en la ciudad, están con nosotros, y tratar de desdibujar estas relaciones jerárquicas que hemos construido hacia ellos al interior de las ciudades?
The question of animal citizenship is a fascinating one. And if we are to think of animals as citizens, that fundamentally changes everything we do every day. And that is one of the problems with changing that. And what we are seeing, not so much in Missouri, but we are seeing at the federal level and in other countries around the world, the actual legal changes to their laws to recognize that certain classes of animals like primates or cetaceans are in essence people and that they should have rights. And those rights means that they can't be put in labs or put in zoos or things of that nature. So the problem is that we, in sort of the Western political tradition, this idea of rights also comes with an obligation to participate, an ability to participate in the political system. So an animal can't go to the polls and vote, right? So if you're going to give them classification as a citizen, then how are they supposed to participate in political life, right? And then you can turn around and you can say, well, wait a second. We recognize that children are citizens and they can't vote, or a person with some sort of mental handicap is considered a person, and we can't just do whatever we want to children or you know, a person with some sort of illness, right? So we do have classes of people that we consider people and citizens that don't participate fully in the democracy. So the argument that animals have to vote and do the exact same thing that adult people do doesn't really hold water when we look at the spectrum of all of people as citizens, right? So I think that is something that the animal rights movement as a whole is actively trying to change. And there is movement on that. So it's going to be very encouraging. It's a very long process because you have to go through the court system, you have to get the right case where you can make these kinds of arguments, and then you have to find judges that are really willing to take a chance and maybe tweak the laws a little bit, which would then enable the legal system to go to the political regulatory system and make the change that way. So it's a very complicated process, but people certainly say that, yes, it's possible. And will it be possible for us to consider a cockroach as a citizen? I don't think that's probably going to happen anytime soon, but I think the idea of considering species that we know to be incredibly intelligent, primates, cetaceans, even dogs, cats, even livestock, right? That we recognize their experiential lives in a real way, that actually can change over time.
Bueno, creo que... una última pregunta. También, entonces, las dos últimas para que ya salgamos en tiempo. Entonces, adelante, por favor.
Muchas gracias. Bueno, tengo una pregunta. ¿Hay un cambio visible en los últimos años en la concepción y el trato a los animales? Esto es muy visible. Hace 4 generaciones era otro asunto, ¿no? En el caso de los animales de compañía es evidente, pero hay una frontera muy sutil entre tratar bien a una mascota y pasar al lado de volver a abusar de los animales de compañía, humanizándolos, por ejemplo, poniéndoles ropa o tratando de introducirlos a nuestros rituales como fiestas de cumpleaños, etcétera, ¿no? Yo entiendo que la relación humana con los animales siempre ha tenido que ver con una necesidad humana, ya sea de alimentación, ya sea de trabajo, de seguridad, etcétera, ¿no? ¿Por qué crees que los humanos estamos haciendo esto con los animales de nuestra compañía? ¿Cuál es nuestra necesidad ahora? ¿Es psicológica? ¿Es social? ¿De qué se trata lo que estamos haciendo?
So the question, from what I'm understanding, is how would I respond to the idea that, we have this change in relationship with our pets where we're sort of seeing them as kids almost, right? And we have birthday parties and give them Christmas presents, and is that what you're asking, right? If we're thinking from a perspective of kind of animal studies issues, we think about the fact that we live in these very urban areas, and historically the transition from human beings living on a daily basis surrounded by animals in a more rural agricultural sense has shifted for a lot of urban people. The only access that we have to other species now is often through companion animal ships. And a lot of people believe that there is actually a need within human beings to have relationships with and have encounters with the natural world. And I include plants and animals in that there is something that just calls to us as the soul of who we are as humans. And so when we see this rise of pet culture, some people argue that that's actually a response, especially in urban areas, to the loss of our daily contact with the natural world. And so we're trying to find a way to replace that contact. Other people would say that this sort of increasing obsession with caring for and celebrating our pets is linked to capitalist developments, that it's actually really expensive to have and raise a child now. Not to mention it can be pretty frustrating over the long haul. I don't know how many of you have kids, but a lot of times you're like, can I get a new model, right? And I mean, obviously, I'm kidding about that. But for a lot of younger people, the idea that you're going to invest a tremendous amount of your life, a tremendous amount of money to raise kids in this unstable economic world causes people to think twice. But we still have a desire to love and care for something. So pets become, for other people, pets can become a replacement for that kind of relationship. That it's, you can live with lots of different species and have these parties, and you're not having to invest in such a long period of time. So other people feel like, well, that's kind of a weird attitude to take, right? So it's a mixed bag. And I think that one of the third point I would make here is that there is a critique of the rise of this pet culture and this obsessive love of our pets, because if we are calling ourselves pet parents and saying that these are my kids and things like that, then it is not acknowledging that, no, this is a dog and I'm a human and we have very different experiences of being in the world. So in essence, we're trying to force them to be almost more human, and we're not recognizing their dogness, if that makes sense, right? And so it's kind of a slippage of identity, because we want to be able, we don't want to erase the fact that we are with these other animals. We want to see their dogness and their catness and their fishness or their spiderness, or whoever you might be having as your pet. And so this rise of that kind of pet culture changes the understanding that we're sharing a multi-species world, and that a dog's needs are not the same as a kid's needs, as a human child's needs, right? So that would be kind of three different ways that we would think about the rise of that movement and the response to that. Now, me personally, while I'm aware of all of those critiques and ways of thinking about it, I mean, if I see a funny cat costume, I'm gonna buy it. You know, it's pretty embarrassing, right? I'm not gonna have a birthday party for my cat, right? But I am gonna give him Christmas presents. Why I do that? Because I want to, right? And because they make all of these really cute things, right? So I think about these things, and then I am subjected to all of the marketing around the pet culture at the same time, right? So I kind of have my own boundaries of what is too much. You know, I don't talk about my cats as my kids. I don't talk of myself as a pet parent, you know, but I do participate in other ways in these things. But I also try very hard to make sure that I understand them as cats and learn about who are cats and what are their behaviors and what are their needs, which are, you know, elusive and changing all the time because they're cats, right? So does that help kind of how you would think about something like that in the response? Yeah? Okay.
Tenemos 7 minutos porque si no después tenemos que pagar más de traducción. Eso no lo debe escuchar el traductor. Entonces, adelante, por favor.
Felicidades y bueno, muchas gracias por compartirnos tu trabajo. Lo mío es un comentario breve, no es pregunta. Mi formación es más como urbanista y me parece bien interesante el concepto, el término de zoópolis, porque desde el urbanismo, bueno, todo este discurso de las ciudades verdes, que se piensa más desde la vegetación, desde los árboles, pero pues qué pasa con los animales, ¿no? Con todos estos seres con los que convivimos, que están en nuestro entorno, incluso no solo en las ciudades, sino alrededor de las ciudades, toda esta devastación que hay por la agricultura, en donde toda esta vida salvaje ya ni siquiera puede existir. Entonces, me encanta que por lo menos ya se esté como planteando, no sé, desde la academia, como que es por lo menos un punto de partida, ¿no?
Especially because she's urbanist, so she concerned a lot about that, so she's very happy. So do you want to say something?
So just quickly, I will say thank you for your comment. And I think that one of the most interesting things to me is if you're watching this movie and seeing what it's like in Kansas City, to then ask yourself, well, what do I know about Mexico City that would be the same or different, right? And you know, just for me being here walking around, I could have a million ideas of how you could think about studying the zoopolis of Mexico City, right? So I think there's just a lot of opportunities for learning how to see animals in our everyday landscapes, right? So hopefully this movie will help you start to do that when you walk around and just say, oh, okay, now I see, what is this linked to? How can I think about this geographically or in relation to the development of the city itself, right? So thank you for your comment.
Bueno, antes de despedir a la doctora Julie Urbanic, comentarles que ella donó 2 libros que vamos a dejar en la biblioteca del Instituto de Geografía, ambos sobre geografía de los animales. Entonces, esa es una, y la otra, en el cartel de convocatoria están nuestros correos electrónicos, y si ustedes quieren que a su vez les demos el correo electrónico de Julie, se los podemos pasar, aunque ayer en su presentación ella también lo puso, y hasta donde entiendo la grabación de esta conferencia fue subida en YouTube, entonces ahí estará toda esa información. La verdad, Julie va a estar todavía unos días más, digo, aquí en el instituto yo creo que es el último día que viene, pero de verdad yo como uno de los organizadores les quiero agradecerle frente a ustedes realmente la disposición que tuvo de venir aquí al Instituto de Geografía, a la UNAM. Me hubiera encantado que hubiera estado lleno este instituto con muchos estudiantes de geografía, del Colegio de Geografía, tienen muchas actividades, o no sé qué, o no le hicimos mucha promoción, pero de todas maneras con las personas que estuvimos yo siento que hubo mucho interés, entonces yo me despido así en este momento, después ya me despediré de ti directamente y le paso la palabra a Jafet y con eso cerramos esta plática.
Yo también quiero agradecerte, Julie, por tus pláticas aquí en el Instituto de Geografía. Como te lo comentaba de manera personal, pues cuando leí tu texto de Geografía de los Animales, Placing Animals, fue muy revelador para mí y fue lo que hizo cambiarle un poco el giro a la geografía que yo estaba haciendo. Yo me considero pues un geógrafo animal, un geógrafo de los animales. De hecho, estoy dando cursos aquí en la Universidad de Geografía de los Animales. Y pues igual agradecerle a todo el público por haber atendido, hay aquí desde estudiantes desde preparatoria, ¿sí? Preparatoria, licenciatura, maestrías, doctorados, postdocs, y en verdad pues espero que esto les haya también servido a ustedes para darse cuenta que hay otras perspectivas desde la geografía que tienen que trabajarse, que desde mi punto de vista hay una fuerte urgencia de la geografía poder este giro hacia el posthumanismo, de construir el antropocentrismo, porque hemos invisibilizado a los animales en las relaciones que tenemos en el entorno, en el espacio, en el lugar, y pues prácticamente.
Perdón, estamos hablando más en la despedida que durante la plática. Agradecerle a Elenita que estuvo en la logística de todo este evento. Gracias, Elenita, otra vez. Siempre has sido muy amable con nosotros. Y a la gente de la Unidad de Tecnologías de Información que estuvo transmitiendo todo esto por internet. Y pues al Instituto de Geografía y al posgrado en Geografía. Y nos despedimos también de las personas que están conectadas en muchos lugares del mundo, que te están viendo, probablemente en Kansas City. Maybe in Kansas City also someone is... Ok, maybe. Ok, entonces pues hay café, hay galletas, todavía se pueden quedar un ratito, Julie estará un momento más, nada más que no nos cobren más de la traducción. Hasta luego. Así, dice Jafet que tomen el curso de zoogeografía con él.